Welcome to Make More Marbles. My name is Brad Hart, and we're here to interview the game changers, the future makers, the co-collaborators and creators who are here to collaborate with one another towards a better future for all of us. Enjoy the show. We've got a great guest coming up for you right now. Welcome to the Make More Marbles show. My name is Brad Hart. As always, I am here coming to you live through the airwaves. And I want to talk to you today about somebody wonderful who I've just been introduced to and who is moving and shaking in the female entrepreneurship community. Now, if you'll remember on some previous episodes, I've talked about the Abundant Purpose Mastermind, which I run with Delina Fajardo. She's a top Tony Robbins coach. She's authored 3 best-selling books about finding, living, and sharing your purpose. And our goal, our stated goal after meeting Sarah Blakely, and she had a great little aside. She said, female entrepreneurs are the most underutilized resource on the planet right now. And that really hit me between the eyes. Our goal is now to create 100 female millionaires. So women who make 1 million a year plus, powerful creators, and serve and support them to get to that goal in the next 5 years. So when I put that out to the universe, guess what came back? Danielle Tate. Danielle, say hello to the crowd.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely, my pleasure. So Danielle, let's start out. We just chatted a little bit before the show. Why don't we start out with the funny story that happened to you this weekend?
The reason I'm not on video is that apparently I had a sunscreen fail and am a very lovely shade of maroon right now.
I love it.
It was Mother's Day on the Bay. I was having a great time. I usually have a hat. I really don't know exactly what happened there.
I totally get it. I always say I'm very patriotic. I'm either red or white. I don't get tan, and if you choke me, I turn blue. But that's about it. That's all I got. Awesome. So you are currently somebody who is a very accomplished author. You've done a lot. You've speaking and engaging with the entrepreneurship community for a very long time. And you almost we were talking a little bit about how you want to break into the entrepreneurship for kids space. Like you feel like that's an underserved desire or need, similar to the way I feel like I'm always talking about ways I can serve veterans, women, and children, specifically with the charities I support. But I'd love to hear your take on why you believe that women and children specifically should be brought into entrepreneurship more on the forefront. And there should be better systems in place by which we train entrepreneurs.
So I will start with women and then segue into children because that's how my life started. So I was an accidental female founder at age 25 and bootstrapped this multi-million-dollar company. And it turns out I'm an anomaly. There aren't a lot of us. The numbers are growing. And as I go to more and more events, as I meet women from around the globe, there's all of these reports and all of these statistics. And the one that just blew me away was women in emerging economies, women entrepreneurs, donate 97% of their profits back into their community through education and healthcare. Men entrepreneurs in the exact same emerging economies put in 37%. That gap, like that 60% gap is world changing. And so I truly believe anything we can do to get more women starting up and scaling up here in the United States and everywhere else in the world, the faster we're going to see, peace, prosperity, etc.
It's actually funny you mentioned that. I have a longtime friend from New York. She's actually from DC. You might have heard of her. Her name's Vidya Thakur, and she runs a NGO in Congo called the Resolve Network. And when I met Vidya, she was talking about how she used to be a lobbyist on Capitol Hill. And she would, look at these giant, massive budgets of money being spent in foreign countries for aid. And what she realized, there was a very small contingent, maybe 1 or 2% of that money being spent on empowering the females in the community. And what they noticed was if they gave the money to men, they would spend it on war and weapons and wine and women and kind of would just get wasted. But when they spent it on women, they would use it to reinvest into the community. And so now the Resolve Network goes out and works with, local females who are looking to be community organizers, entrepreneurs, to build sustainable communities in war-torn regions of the DRC. And I thought that was really fascinating. And I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but yeah, it's a really great way to look at it. It's like, all right, stabilize the feminine and the masculine gets in line.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, like I love men as well, but when you're looking at statistic after statistic and you're talking to women, it's at a 10,000 women event and speaking to this lady from Northern Africa, and she's like, oh yes, and we hire the unhirables, and Originally I'm a nice Methodist girl from Pennsylvania. I'm like, well, who are the unhirables? And she's like, oh, all of the professional women living on the streets because they're divorced or had a child out of wedlock. And I was just stunned. I was
Oh
like,
my
the
God.
ripple effect just ripples even further, understanding that component. So, and then segueing into a happier note, children. So ever the entrepreneur, when I see a gap in a market, I feel the need to fill it or find someone to help fill it. And I have a little boy who just had his first viable business idea at age 7. And both his dad and I are entrepreneurs, and we didn't want to push the whole thing on him. He's involved, he labels postcards, but when he was ready, I'm like, oh, let's go on Amazon. Let's buy him like every book on kids entrepreneurship.
Hmm.
And there aren't any.
Ah.
I mean, there's one or two with animals, but they're really cutesy. And I was like, why? I mean, I have, he loved construction. I have construction ABC. Why isn't there, entrepreneur alphabet that gives some like really simple beginnings of, okay, if you have a problem, you can make a solution. If you have an idea, how do you build it? What's a co-founder? Like getting these very basic pieces in little people's brains early. So because the way they look at the world is so different and unbiased and interesting, I think that they come up with some of the most innovative things and companies if they're enabled.
It's fascinating you mentioned that. I mean, I always look at situations like, for example, we're doing this, I guess you call it a mission trip. We're going to Greece, to Athens in June to help build Syrian refugee camps, because everybody looks at the Syrian refugee crisis and they say, somebody should do something about that. And I look at it, I say, well, aren't you somebody? So it's like,
Exactly.
So when you look at a problem and you're like, oh, this is a problem, and nobody seems to want to solve it, and you're passionate about it, and you feel like you have the skills and the resources, or the people have the skills and the resources, because I'm like an owl. I'm always asking who, right? I don't need to know. I don't need to know everybody if I know everything, if I know everybody, right? So, I'm always asking who would be the person to solve this, and how can I enroll them into the possibility, if you will, to quote Landmark, because I just did Landmark Advance this weekend, to go and take that on. So you basically looked on Amazon, which I've done once or twice in my life. I'll be perfectly honest. And you said, oh, there's no entrepreneur kids books. This is like a really underserved market. And I think it's true. Like, we're watching Shark Tank now, and we're seeing kids like the bow tie kid from Georgia. I forget his name exactly, but he had, these really cool handmade bow ties. And now he's making deals with Mark Cuban. Like, it's ready. Let's go. I saw another kid, Caleb Maddox, who's making like, he's 14 years old. He's this motivational speaker. He's making, 10K to give a speech. And I'm like, this is awesome. I wish I got started that early, but now we have the tools and the means to do it. When I was 12, I wanted a guitar effects pedal. So I went out and knocked on people's doors and mowed their lawns and whatever else they needed until I had the money. Like, I've always had that capability to go out and make it happen. And I want to give kids the empowerment to, if they choose, right? It's not a forced thing, to take another path through life, not just show up. Because I believe that this next generation is going to have a rude awakening when it comes to, having a job with security. That just doesn't exist anymore. If you're not providing value to the marketplace, you're not going to have a job. So you got to almost create your own job that fits your strengths and your flow, and create the capacity to serve at a higher level.
No, I completely agree. I read a statistic. There are 16 million millennial moms currently. I'm a very old millennial. And another study on millennials was saying that over 70% of them don't want a job in corporate America. They'd rather create their own company and work for themselves. So again, I'm like, if there's this whole market of parents that want to be entrepreneurs, of course they're going to want and look for resources to help their children, access that information and understand that mindset earlier on than they did.
That's awesome. So you have a 7-year-old son, and you guys visit Turks and Caicos every year for August. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Is that like a retreat to recharge with your family, or how does that go?
So yes, my husband and I are big scuba divers, and a long time ago, before anyone really knew about Turks and Caicos, it was sort of our dropout spot. And then when our son was 2, we're like, we should take him on a proper beach vacation. Where should we go? And of course, we went back to Turks and Caicos. And it was the first time I had spent more than 2 days above water on the island. And it's just amazing. Like, just so many natural, beautiful things to do, great people, loads of food. I love to eat. And
You and me
with
both.
being, serial entrepreneurs and juggling businesses and babies and figuring it all out, we're busy and we oscillate on a pretty high level. So we're like, what, let's spend an entire month in August and down in Turks and Caicos and see what happens. And what happened was, The first year I messed up and had a huge code release right before I left and it didn't go through. And so I spent like 2 weeks fixing it while I was there. But by year 3, we all look forward to it. I wake up, I do a sunrise beach walk, we come back, have breakfast, I go snorkeling with my little guy in the ocean.
Hmm.
And when I come back in September, when we all come back in September, we are ready to kill it. So it's a full family getaway, hang out, rejuvenate sort of a thing.
Yeah, and people always, they come up with objections, right? The brain is wired through evolution to point out the negative, and some people out there listening might be like, oh, I don't have the money. That would be nice. I can't do it. Blah blah blah. Sounds nice for you, but in reality, like you can't chop the tree down with a dull axe, right? Abraham Lincoln even said, like, if I had 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend the first 2 hours sharpening the axe. Like, guys, if you're burned out, if you're not, rejuvenated, if you're not enjoying your life, the capacity you have with which to serve at a higher level is diminished. So it's a little bit nonlinear, but you got to realize you're a human being. You have limitations. You got to take the time to really recharge so you can come back to whatever you're doing in a way. And it doesn't have to go to, take your whole family to Turks and Caicos for a month necessarily, but you need to find time to recharge. And there's a lot of free things or cheap things you can do in order to take that time. Like I do meditation retreats up in New York every year. There's this beautiful Wan Dharma Buddhist Center. It's like Korean Buddhist. They serve you vegetarian, vegan meals. And for 3 or 5 or 7 days or how long you want to stay there, you can stay in their place, which is super cheap and reasonable, which is 490 acres of just beautiful wilderness that you can wander through at your leisure. You can meditate with them. It's totally silent. You can do whatever you want, basically. And it's just a great reset button. I try to do it once a year.
That's very cool.
Yeah, so you talked about juggling. Now tell me about your ability to juggle. Are you juggling chainsaws or hatchets or pineapples? What are we juggling here?
Your basic bean bags upwards to apples and whatnot. In 4th grade, to pass health class, for some unknown reason, we all had to learn how to juggle. And Mrs. Baker was our teacher, and literally you had to learn how to juggle. So there's this small subsection of the population that came from Bedford, Pennsylvania, where every single person knows how to juggle.
Is that right? Pennsylvania is an odd place. Like I remember rowing on the river, on the Susquehanna River at Binghamton. That's where I went to school. And they would always tell us if something happens in the boat, on the crew team, don't go on the Pennsylvania side, go on the New York side. And one day I asked my coach about this. I'm like, why do we only want to go on the New York side? He's like, because there's moonshiners on the Pennsylvania side. If you go on their land, they might shoot you. I'm like, oh my God. And then there's another town called Centralia. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but it's on fire. The whole town is on fire. It's been on fire for like 50 years. Apparently there was a mining disaster. It was a coal mine that caught on fire and it's still burning to this day. The whole town was given up and there's nobody that lives, or a few like random people that live there, but everybody had to leave. So Pennsylvania is a heck of a place. It's got the world's
it's a good place too.
America's
It's beautiful. It has kind people. Yeah.
Philly's an awesome city of brotherly love. I'm more of a of a Ralph's cheesesteak kind of guy. I don't know about you. What is it? Geno's and Jim's are the two big ones.
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah. Right on. Awesome. So I want to kind of mine your brain here for the audience a little bit. So I'm going to ask you some more rapid fire questions about entrepreneurship and what you would do if you were either a child or a young lady or a young man for that matter, right? We're not to the detriment of men. Just starting your first business. What would be the first thing you focus on in order to gain traction quickly?
I think obviously customer development, like truly understanding who your customers are, what they want, what the problem is, what the solution they will pay for is. It may take you a little more time to scale, but if you actually know what people want and will pay for, in the long run, you will be vastly more successful.
I like it. Yeah. I'm always talking to my people about, there's 4 things in a business. There's ideas, people, numbers, and timing. And you got to find the thing you're great at, or sometimes people ride the line between 2. But if you can get really clear on that, you can create an opportunity to basically get the ball moving in the direction that you want to get to, right? And sometimes you have to learn from others who are successful in the space. Sometimes you can figure it out on your own. But if that's not your strength, make sure you have the right people on your team, either through partnership or hiring, that can get you to that answer quickly, because really all businesses exist to serve people. So if you don't have paying customers, leads, sales, value delivery of some sort, whether it be a product or service and some sort of operational structure, you're going to be in really big trouble. You're going to have a really expensive hobby and you're going to fail. And then ultimately you gain no momentum. and you can't grow and serve more people, right? And that's really the end of this. That's the end result.
I agree. I always say to look for captive audiences. Like, so for me, starting Miss Now Misses, this online name change service for brides, I would go to the big bridal dress sales where women were wrapping the building and they were stuck. They were in line. So of course they would talk to me. And then, I had a friend that did an app for marathon runners. And like, we went to the end of marathons and asked people, polled people about it. And, it's a generation that loves to hide behind phones and data, and just actually talking to people, you catch the nuances that make all the difference in your initial offerings.
You mentioned Eric Ries earlier, Lean Startup. I think he always talks about the idea of a minimum viable product.
Yes.
And also the idea of, kind of like testing it out with your people, right? Giving them something that is very basic, asking them questions, but asking them in such a way where, they can give you the feedback that you need in order to iterate, right? There's no such thing as here's the idea, right? Everybody gets hung up on the idea. The idea always changes. I can't think of a single product, service, or company that started out with the idea that they have now. You got to be able to iterate. You got to be able to pivot, because ultimately what ends up happening is if you get stuck, you really just want to keep moving. I think that's the biggest key. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yes. One of my favorite sayings is have a good idea daily. It's
Yeah.
not the one giant idea that got you started that's going to keep you alive. It's have a good idea daily. I have team meetings every week, and I'm like, I want to hear your best idea from the week. Like, what are we doing with it? Where are we going with it? And then the top 2 or 3 tend to get some cash so they can make that happen.
Right on, Danielle. And you said you are focusing now on helping more people scale past the $1 million mark. Can you talk about how that works?
Absolutely. So again, being a problem solver and identifying gaps in the market, I'm an accidental entrepreneur. I don't have an MBA. I have a bachelor's in biology. And yet I bootstrapped this multi-million-dollar enterprise. And that doesn't happen. Women, I forget the statistic, it's less than half, maybe even more, like 20% of women business owners get past 1 employee and get past the $1 million mark. And so the second half of my book is just dedicated to helping people understand. Actually, one of the chapters is have a good idea daily, and how to grow and how to scale and make strategic partnerships and not get stuck in too niche of a business and you having to do everything, so there's no way to possibly scale and grow. So that is something that I'm very passionate about, and something that we're all slowly changing.
It's funny you mentioned biology. That's what I got my degree in at Binghamton.
Really?
And
Excellent.
I did nothing with it. Yeah, I had an experience where I got out of school and I went to, I did what I knew how to do. I'd shotgun my resume at 200 firms. I'm like, I'm going to get like a research job while I figure out what I'm going to do for the next year. So I did, and I got one interview, I remember. And I went in and I sat down at the desk, and the guy said, so I'm looking at your resume. Where'd you get your PhD? I'm like, I don't have a PhD, sir. He says, we can only hire PhDs. I said, well, just humor me for a second. If I did go get a PhD and come back to you, what would you pay me? He said, we start PhDs at $35,000 a year. I said to myself, very polite. I was like, okay, so I'm going to go to 8 more years of school, write a book basically to come back and, accumulate $250,000 in debt and come back and make $35,000 a year. I think I'll go back to bartending, actually. That's what I did.
You can make a lot more. No, I didn't get into medical school and ended up selling copiers. So, it all works out in the end. I'm so glad I took organic chemistry.
Yeah, exactly. I got an A in that class. I worked really hard because everybody told me that's what you need to be a doctor. I'm like, I'm so glad I missed that. I mean, I'm 31 now, and a lot of my friends who are doctors are, nothing against them. I give them all the credit in the world, but they're overweight. They don't have, a lot of savings. They're up in debt into their eyeballs, and they don't really love their lives, and that's the real key difference. Is like, I wasn't meant to do that. And I had to give up that dream and that ego dream of significance of being Dr. Hart, the cardiologist, or some goofy thing I was going to do, and really just get real about what I'm here to do and who I can support and what my strengths. Like, I feel like you're given this beautiful canvas and all these paints and paintbrushes to build, to build your life out with. But, it's like doing a 1,000-piece puzzle. You throw it all out on the board. You don't know, what these pieces mean. And you start putting some together, and maybe you get some of the edges together, and you start looking at it and you're like, this starts to make sense. And eventually you get to the halfway mark and you start to see the puzzle coming together. And at the end, it's like you're putting pieces together as quickly as possible. And now that putting a 1,000-piece puzzle together is possible. And you're no longer afraid of big problems like that because you've seen it done once before. It's just a matter of time before you figure it out. I look at life the same way. It's like you have all these pieces of this puzzle, these points of light in a big mosaic, but you can't see the full thing yet. And your job is not to try to connect the dots looking forward, like Steve Jobs says. It's to look back and say, okay, what have I done before that gives me the confidence to move forward, and trusting that life is happening for me and showing up in a way that is going to serve the best and highest, desire that I have, right? Because I believe those desires exist to point us in the direction of where we ultimately intend to go. And if we decide to step into that, that can be a really powerful life experience. But if we decide to shy away from that and close off, nothing happens. In fact, we start moving in the opposite direction, which, I don't believe in just getting by. I believe that you're either growing or you're dying.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I've learned over time, I'm a couple years older than you, I think 3 years older than you, that life is long and
You're 21?
exactly. No, the life is long and opportunities are endless. I think a lot of us get stuck like, oh, I have to do this. I've got one shot. There's this one thing. And while it's important to be growing and moving and doing, there's a long time. Like life doesn't end at 30. I haven't hit 40
Mm-hmm.
yet, but I don't think it ends at 40 either. And some of the most insanely successful people I meet with did crazy things in their 50s, their 60s, and even their 70s. So I feel like we get a lot of time to iterate and do a lot of interesting things, not just one thing that we've pigeonholed ourselves into.
And I have a great, somebody who's really changed my life is Dr. Peter Diamandis. And he wrote a book called Abundance and another one called Bold with Stephen Kotler. Stephen Kotler's works are awesome. I just got sent actually by somebody who I'm interviewing today, Brandon Duncan, a copy of Stealing Fire, which is his newest book. And he's partnered up with Singularity University, a guy named Ray Kurzweil. If you ever heard of Ray Kurzweil, I recommend you check out his work. He's like the lead engineer at Google. Like he's one of those brilliant people on the planet. And he talks about this idea of the singularity, where our technological capacity to increase our lifespan, to, exponentially increase the capability of technology and the ability to support this earth, food, energy, water, shelter, universal basic income, all of these big ideas that are now becoming possible. It's really now, a race to just get everybody on board and enroll everybody into the possibility of now we have this ability. Now we have the responsibility to provide at a higher level so that we can unleash all this human potential. It's a really cool thing. So the reason I brought up Peter is because, I really feel like aging is going to be a thing of the past. I really feel like your lifespan is going to be a thing of the past. These are going to be anachronistic ideas because when we create digital consciousness through AI, VR, AR, like that's not even going to be a question. Like I want to bring this home because it's a really important concept. Like think about this way. We can see time linearly, but what if time already exists in a sense that there's more to the puzzle than we can even see? I was in an Uber ride recently and the guy had an idea about how you could create virtual experiences of your loved ones where they could be dripped out over 50 or 100 years. What if grandpa lit the menorah every year for the next 100 years, even though he passed away 100 years ago? What if you could go to a park bench and sit and, a GPS beacon, turned on your virtual experience. You put on this headset. Now you're sitting in this park with your father who's passed, and he can tell the story in his words to you at the time it's right of how he met your mother in that park on that same bench. I mean, the possibilities are endless with the things we can do and we'll be able to do very quickly. So guys, if you're looking at the world as, just you, I just invite you to look out a little bit and use entrepreneurship as a vehicle to create the change in the world that you want to see, because you're going to see a lot of problems, right? We can create a lot of destruction and pain and suffering, but we can also create a lot of beauty. And it's really just a choice of how we want to use the free will we're given. So I recommend, if you are not in that current headspace, start reading up on entrepreneurship. That is the keys to the kingdom, right? How do we create something from nothing? And that's what we do. That's what we want to help you do too. Okay, so there's that. Danielle, I'd really love to switch gears here a little bit and talk about how Empowered Women International, your nonprofit or the nonprofit that you serve, is using entrepreneurship education and training to give immigrant, refugee, and at-risk women financial security and social stability.
Yeah, so this is something that just aligns so much with my skill set and my passion. They asked me to come on as their spokeswoman a little over a year ago. And I was like, okay, well, what do you do? Because the name Empowered Women International, I'm like, what is this? And what they do is they look for refugee, immigrant, and at-risk women in the DC metropolitan area, Northern Virginia and Maryland. And instead of just giving them a handout, they give them entrepreneurship training. So if they don't have a business, they work with them. It's a 6-month program where they say, what are you good at? What in your home country did you do? Or what textiles, what interesting things do you have access to? And by the end, they have a full business plan and a mentor to help them launch that business. They also have another program where if you have a small enterprise, they help you grow it and scale it into something bigger. And working with these women, listening, they have pitch contests, like the amount of growth. These women come in, they don't know anyone, and they build this community. Like one woman told me, she's like, it's not just the business that came out of this program. It's the fact that I met other women like me. She's like, I never felt like I ever fit in this country until I walked into the doors and made friends that we were all from different places, from different languages, but we all had business ideas and now we can actually do something with them. It's just so powerful and something I would love to see scale much further than just my city.
I love it. And how can people serve and support you with that? And let me frame this around the community, because ultimately, you give your time, energy, and attention to us as a guest, and you share with what you're working on. But I want to go a step deeper and show people that we can really have a conversation here and open up this to the wider world out there, the people listening. Danielle, if we could support and serve you in some way, shape, or form, if we could connect you to the resource, the opportunity, the person, or the system that would help you get to the next level, what would that look like? Let's get specific and considerate to your needs. And we want to support you because you're a servant of life, and life supports that which supports life. So what would that look like?
That's incredibly generous, and I'm feeling very selfish, actually. In our discussion, we talked about me writing this book, this children's book for entrepreneurs, and I've met with 2 different agents at very large, prestigious agencies, and they're having trouble seeing the fact that children can understand entrepreneurship. And so
Hmm.
if anyone listening is an agent or works for a publishing house, and would like to connect with me and sees the vision of getting children to understand entrepreneurship through an alphabet book, that would be exactly what I am looking for right now, and take me from, day to day, just pushing, struggling, calling, pitching agents to actually moving forward with the project. The book is written.
Got it. Got it. And thank you very much for taking the time to articulate that, and also having the courage. I think people, especially entrepreneurs, the thing I love about entrepreneurs, and this is not mine, this is a mentor of mine, Kurt, always says, is that we create more than we consume, and we create before we consume. But to walk the abundant line in life, it's not just about what you can give, and that's important, but it's also what you can receive, right? I think Gary Vaynerchuk says 51 give, 49 take. I don't know what the exact percentage is or what works, but I know there's a line to walk between miser and martyr that makes a difference. So if you're not able or willing to receive, I would check into that, because ultimately the more full and overflowing your cup is, the more you can actually do for people. And it's not about you owning money or contacts or relationships. None of those things are yours or you take them with you. At the end of the day, it's what you can do with them to direct them. I don't look at entrepreneurs as capturers of flow so much as they direct it into the right places. I have another mentor whose belief structure is that he needs to be as wealthy as possible so he can do the most good and direct the most resources to where they're needed most. And when you look at it that way, it becomes this raging river of opportunity, of flow, that you can direct in any way you want towards whatever you want. And taking a little bit off of yourself is no problem, right? It's not about generosity or selfishness. It's about how are we directing the flow that's already there? People want, need, and desire things. It's creating $1 trillion worth of opportunity every day. All right. We could just tap into that in whatever way we choose.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think, at least the first half of my entrepreneurial career, I felt like I had to know everything and be everything and do everything. And learning, growing up with my startup, it's, figure out what you don't know and ask someone who does. And
Mm.
I feel like entrepreneurs are incredibly reciprocal. Like as soon as someone's like, hey, do you know somebody about this? I'm like, sure. They're like, well, what can I do for you? Like it's this like crazy, like literally like, what do you do? How can I help you? And then there's just sort of this love fest afterwards. And it's a
Yeah.
very cool thing to be a part of.
It really, really is. And that's what I'm always doing. Like I always tell people, like seek in every encounter to diagnose, right? That's the first thing. Just understand what's going on. Make people feel listened to, heard, and seen. And then from that place, you can serve, support, create space for whatever you need to do. It's like planting seeds, right? Seek in every encounter to diagnose, serve, support, and create space. And then finally, crops, right? Connect resources, opportunities, people, and systems together for mutual benefit.
Very cool.
Yeah. Anyway, so let's wrap this up. Danielle, it's been an absolute pleasure. Do you want to leave anybody with a parting thought? Is there anything coming up for you as far as what you need to share with the world today?
You know what? I actually have a gift for your listeners.
Oh, wonderful.
If they go to elegantentrepreneur.co/make more marbles, all one word, the Grow Fast chapter, which we mentioned, is available for them to download as a PDF.
Yes, please go on over there. It's elegantentrepreneur.co/make more marbles. If you don't know how to spell that by now, you probably new to the podcast. So it's MAKEMOREMARBLES. You guys are awesome. Thank you, marble makers. Thanks for going out and making more instead of just grabbing for what's already there. Danielle, you are amazing. Thank you so much. I'm so happy we got connected today to share your gifts with the world. And where can people find you online, on Facebook? Or how do you communicate if they have that connect for you?
Absolutely. Instagram is probably my best place to connect. I'm Elegant Entrepreneur. On Twitter, I'm elegant_entre because I ran out of characters. Facebook, I'm also Elegant Entrepreneur. So pretty consistent across the board. I'm forever highlighting amazing women entrepreneurs, giving out business tips, and promoting causes that I think are incredibly important and pertinent.
Well, and with that, we are going to get off of this podcast. Guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you on the next show. Thanks so much for listening to the Make More Marbles podcast. For more tips, hacks, and strategies to create an amazing, abundant life in your health, wealth, and relationships, whatever that means to you, head on over to makemoremarbles.com. Check out our cool explainer video about what we're about, and join our community of entrepreneurial game changers. We want to help you level up your life in every possible way. And don't forget to subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play, wherever you listen to your podcasts, and please do leave a review. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next podcast.